Transport and Infrastructure Committee meeting 816. We'd like to welcome Acting Mayor Councillor Gates in attendance and all other, no, we've got nearly a full contingent of member councils. First and foremost, apologies from Councillor Patterson. If I could have somebody to move that. Moved by Councillor Vorster, seconded by Councillor Peter Young. All those in favour? That's carried. There's noted that the Mayor's leave of absence is there. If I could have someone, a confirmation of the minutes from the previous meeting. Moved Councillor Vorster, seconded Councillor Taylor. All those in favour? That's carried. I'm not aware of any conflicts of interest or declarations that have been brought forward before the meeting. Thank you. We've got a few starred items there, councillors. We've got 5.1 is starred, 6.1, 6.2 and 6.3. I note that Councillor Peter Young would like to unstar 6.3. Did we want to unstar any of the others? And did you want to start, and the 6.4 and 7.1 are both got presentations with them. So if I could have someone to move 5.1, 6.1 and 6.2, moved by Councillor Owen Jones, seconded by Councillor Taylor. All those in favour? That is carried. We'll go to 6.3, councillors, which is a petition regarding installation of a speed hump at Armstrong Way, Highland Park, and go to Councillor Peter Young.
As advised to you, I have a proposed change recommendation. So we have the officer's recommendation on the screen. If we could please have that change presented. Thank you. So, Chair, the motion is that Council notes the findings of the investigation number 2, that the local area works and services process be initiated to fund a dynamic drive-safe speed awareness device in Armstrong Way and or Kincaid Drive in the vicinity of Kincaid Park, and 3, that the Chief Petitioner be advised of Council's decision. Thank you. I'll tell you. Yeah.
What does it mean in terms of the local area works and services process be initiated?
Yeah. If I can get a second, I'll speak to it.
I'm happy to second that.
Councillor Vorster, seconded by Councillor Vorster for Councillor Young's change there. Okay,
Thanks,
and I'll go
Chair.
to Councillor Young to speak to it.
Thank you. I read the report last week, and whilst it's, in my opinion, technically very correct and you can't flaw it, I felt that it was a bit of a disappointment that I hadn't been approached and consulted about it, being the area councillor, and this being a petition of residents who had approached me initially and advised me this was going to be the process that they wanted to pursue. Subsequent to the council meeting last week, when I mentioned that this particular item in the context of the wildlife protection strategy that we've implemented across the city, officers approached me and said, well, we're sorry we didn't have that meeting with you, we'd like to do that now. And so in fact that meeting was conducted last week, and the motion before you has been prepared by the officers as a result of the meeting. So essentially, as I said, the report is fine, but in this case I'm feeling that if there's a bit of sympathy shown for the genuine interest of the community, I'm quite prepared for funding a smiley sign, a modified smiley sign. We've seen them elsewhere where they have koalas on the screen. This might just say wildlife, and that will help. There'll be two of those signs in an area which has not yet been defined, and hence the officers need to do some further assessment of where that exactly might be because of the technology and the need for straight line and so forth. But the officers believe that they can undertake that work under the LAW program. I can subsequently fund it, and I'm very happy to do that to get an outcome that's responding to the genuine interests and concerns of the community, because there have certainly been vehicle strikes or animals impacted by vehicles in this vicinity, and the local community in that vicinity are all in one voice in their concern about it. And whilst it doesn't make a lot of sense because this little area where the animals are coming out onto the road isn't across from one park to another, it's just an area where they come out onto the road. But the vehicle strike data certainly shows, and I'm sure you can't all see that very well from where you are, but this is a map given to me by the officers. This is the street in concern, and you can see these strike points and the hot spots that have been generated. So I think there's a very genuine body of evidence to confirm and support the findings that I'm seeking today. Thank you.
Councillor Gates.
Thanks. Through you, Chair. I just wondered, Councillor Young, whether you want to retain 2 from the original recommendation.
I could quite well do that, but I just didn't want to muck things up because that was the first proposal sent to me by the officers subsequently, so I thought I'd just leave it at that. But if you want to support that.
I would support
Thank you.
the establishment of a fact sheet.
Yep.
I don't know that would be too great a problem for the officers to put a fact sheet together to just support your motion a little more. So if you wanted to make the original 2 and then yours 3,
Yep.
covers it all.
That's great. Thanks, Acting Mayor. Thanks, Chair. I'd like to include that with your concession. Number 2. Thank you.
You're on your way.
Yeah, and I think in support of that too, Councillor Young, is that I've had conversations with quite a few teachers that work at that school who are, visit Burleigh quite often, and students, and they all identify the fact that there's most definitely wildlife on the school grounds every morning that they get there. So they are actually, there is animal movement around the area. So it's something that's supported by, attendees at the school, both teachers and students. So I'll go to Councillor O'Neill next.
Thanks, Chair. Just as a matter of curiosity, have the officers given you any idea of how much these signs would be?
Yes, through your Chair, the likely cost is about $8,000 each, and so we're expecting 2 signs. And I intend to fund that out of the 22-23 LAW with Council's support. Thanks.
Councillor Caldwell.
In the fact sheet, could we use the word kangaroo instead of macropod?
Yes, I think it would be, yeah. I think the younger generation may not remember Skippy. Yeah. Councillor Gates. Oh, sorry, Acting Mayor. Yeah.
Donna will do me. If the fact sheet, I just, through you, Chair, to the Acting Director, will that be general in terms of the facts that are provided and not specific to that exact location? That it could be used in other instances where it might be relevant?
Yeah. Through you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Acting Mayor. I think we will create some content that can be used in other areas, and obviously I think for the educational fact sheet for this specific location there'll be some bespoke information for that one area as well. But I think the idea of the previous recommendation was that we'd provide or produce some content that could be used in other areas of the city as well.
Thank you. That would be helpful.
Like Coomer.
Councillor Vorster.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and without providing a direction whatsoever to city officers under Local Government Act 2009 or its subordinate regulations, simply asking a question, would it be possible to also arrange a fact sheet for ducks? I've got 1/3 of my divisions covered in water, and quite often I'll receive a request from residents to erect those care for wildlife signs. I'm ending up with a proliferation of signage everywhere saying beware the ducks are crossing. I think a good alternative would be to offer the concerned locals the opportunity to help me letterbox some of these fact sheets concerning ducks, and we may end up with fewer signs on the road. So I'll leave that with you, through you, Madam Chair.
Through you, Madam Chair, we can certainly consider that. Thank you, Councillor Worcester. Absolutely.
Councillor Young, did you have anything up to offer? All right, so councillors, we have that change recommendation there. It's actually moved by Councillor Peter Young, seconded by Councillor Vorster. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you. And councillors, we'll go to item 6.4, which is the Freight Data Program presentation, please. And I think, who's presenting?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. Councillors, I'll invite, just entering the room now, Coordinator of our Network Intelligence and Transport Systems Program, Alison O'Rourke, who will lead the presentation, and along with our Strategic Transport Analyst, Phil Calfs, as well, who's both very active on this particular program. So without further ado, with your blessing, I'll throw to Alison to lead off.
Thank you, Acting Director.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, councillors. Thank you for having us this afternoon. This agenda item is a presentation only. There's no accompanying report. And the purpose is to provide council with an overview of the Freight Data Program, as well as an importance of the strong evidence base to support proposed investment in the city's freight network. How do I go down? Thank you. To provide some context about the scale of the task, transport and logistics in Australia is represented by movement of freight by road, rail, air and sea. It's a $100 billion industry and employs over 500,000 people. It's important to note that transport by road is approximately 60% of the market size. The average annual growth rate between 2021 and 2026 is predicted to be around 4.5%. Compared to historical growth rates of an industry of less than 4%, it's accelerating. Also, when you compare that to the predicted growth rate or the annual inflation rate between the same period of less than 2.5%, it's growing at a faster rate than the rest of the economy in Australia. Sorry, Matt. There we go. Thank you. For the Gold Coast, freight on the Gold Coast directly contributes about $1.5 billion per annum to the regional economy and employs about 6,000 people locally. But as importantly, indirectly, it supports some of the other sectors of the Gold Coast economy, including the industrial areas, Yatala being the biggest of those. They rely on an efficient freight network, and that's what attracts them to the Gold Coast. So, it does bring some great news for employment and the economy for the Gold Coast, but it also brings some challenges with it as well. The transport sector is responsible for 17% of Australia's emissions, and its growth can be attributed to population growth as well as the thriving economy on the Gold Coast, as well as changes in consumer spending. By 2025, e-commerce will be a $95 billion industry. So we're changing our spending habits and using more of the online purchasing. Now that attracts demand for both bulk freight as well as the micro freight task, which impacts a broader Yatala area as well as our other industrial areas, but also our local roads, as we expect more of these deliveries to our homes at a faster rate than we've ever witnessed before. It's interesting to note as well that in April 2020, likely fueled by the pandemic, Woolworths doubled its capacity for home deliveries. And if anyone has teenage kids like myself, you know this generation is not afraid to ordering takeaway online, particularly when it's linked to their mum and dad's credit card. So all of this is fueling the demand for the freight industry. But we have a plan. In fact, we have more than one plan. The vision of the Gold Coast City Freight Plan is to improve the efficiency, safety and sustainability of freight movements around the Gold Coast. There are 4 priority actions associated with this plan. Planning to build the future, optimising the freight network, supporting smart freight and connecting with the freight industry. In order to deliver these strategies or these actions, we need to rely on good, reliable data to provide intelligence. The Sustainable Road Pavement Management Plan provides strategic framework to effectively manage the city's ageing road network and pavement. So once again, reliable data is required to support, in particular, Priority 5, which looks at providing intelligence-led decision-making around pavement standards, geometric designs, and focus where to focus the maintenance activities for the purpose of asset protection. Thank you. So the Freight Data Program is part of the broader Transport and Traffic Data Management Program. We have been developing this program since late 2018, and what we've managed to achieve, muchly through the efforts of my colleague here, Phil Carve, is a real-time data collection system that collects volumes on our road network, traffic volumes on our road network. It also provides travel times on our road network in real time, as well as numbers of active transport users that we can classify via pedestrians, cyclists, and other. We know the impacts of COVID on our public transport system and what that's looking like, and how that public transport system is also evolving through that first mile, last mile task as well. We also have information on the number of crashes, incidents on the road network and what impact that have. And of course, our Freight Data Program is now a key part of that broader program. We're providing network intelligence to informed policy investment decisions for the future. So, the freight transport data collection technologies, we really need to consider what technology we use for what purpose and in what location. They all have their pros and cons. Historically, we've used tube counters. They're very effective for providing year-on-year trends in traffic volumes and for classifying vehicles in the 12 bin classification in accordance with Austroad standards. Weigh in motion is also provides excellent granular information, and as the name suggests, it provides the weight of vehicles. We've been trialling in the past few years video detection as well as radar and automatic number plate recognition systems, and recently we've had a LiDAR trial to see what safety impacts they have, not only for the freight network but in the broader road network aspect. So we're considering all of the technologies and how we can mesh the data together to provide more intelligence-led decision making. The weigh in motion system, we have 3 weigh in motion systems installed across our freight network at the moment. The first one was installed at Stanmore Road in 2019. The second one was installed on the Gold Coast Highway in Surfers Paradise, and the third one has recently been installed on Pimpama Jacobswell Road. So this shows just it's a daily profile from Stanmore Road across 3 days, just demonstrating the number of heavy vehicles that use that route, which is not unexpected given it's in the middle of Yatala enterprise area, and it's also one of our extractive routes. But you can see the number of vehicles over 60 tonne. In fact, we've had a vehicle up to 90 tonne go through that particular location. So the impact on the road pavement is quite considerable, and it's increasing our maintenance cost associated with that. This is an example of some information that we've got out of our temporary traffic data collection. So what it's showing here, between 2013 and 2020, traffic volumes increased in this particular location in Ashmore by 5%, but the number of heavy vehicles has grown by 58%. So in comparison, that's quite a considerable growth in that type of vehicle. I'll now go through a couple of use cases. So the first one is, how have we been using this data? It's great to collect all this data, but how have we been using it? And there's 3 reasons why we typically collect it and we've been using it. The first one is around our policy and planning. We spend millions and millions of dollars on investing in our road network and our road infrastructure. And so to have some real evidence-based information prior to making our final decisions is critical to making the right decisions and providing value for money for the community. The second reason is reporting and trend analysis. We know this freight is growing, and so we need to monitor that and understand where the freight task is growing and how quickly it's growing. And the third reason is for the asset management purpose, to protect our assets, to know where we need to spend our money to support the freight industry, but also to manage our asset base moving forward. I'll now hand over to my colleague Phil to go through the second use case.
Thank you, Alison. So as Alison mentioned, back in 2019, we installed Way in Motion. As part of this project, it was conducted as a joint collaboration of branches between Transport and Traffic and City Assets. The interest from City Assets was the pavement and maintenance, specifically at Stanmore Road, which is the site you see there. There was abnormally high maintenance on the pavement. The hypothesis was that this was due to heavy laden vehicles stopping on a downhill at the red light there, travelling at 80 kilometres an hour. So this was causing pavement rutting. As part of this project, we were interested in the data as well as operational efficiencies, and we formed a project to look at giving priority to freight vehicles. The priority system detects heavy vehicles downstream 400 metres. On the next slide I have a video to demonstrate this, and holds the green light until the truck has passed the intersection. While the project driver was to reduce pavement damages and maintenance costs, there are also secondary benefits. This includes operational efficiencies for the freight industry, reducing the amount of time they're stopped at the intersection, less wear and tear and fuel costs as well as reducing the likelihood of vehicles running a red light, so safety improvements, and improving the performance of the road network as well. An additional benefit was the reduction in emissions as well. If you go to the next slide. So this is just a short clip demonstrating what the priority is. So this first section is before the priority was turned on, and it's looking at the intersection before activation. So you'll see we've got a real-time CCTV view in the top. In the bottom, it's Streams, which is our intersection software. You can see there it's just been detected. So this is a vehicle that's over 40 tonnes. It's 400 metres prior to the intersection. Stanmore Road and Turner, correct. So it takes about 16 seconds for the vehicle to come into view, and we're watching it now. As you'll note on the signals there, the traffic light has just turned red. This vehicle has not approached the stop bar yet. It has run the red light. So there's some safety improvements here by providing priority. That vehicle was laden, it's heavy, it's travelling at 80 kilometres an hour. This is now after priority has been activated. As you'll see, it's just been detected. It will now come into field of view, as you can see there. We're aware of it, and it's going to provide a green light through the intersection. Overall, there's less than a maximum 31 seconds of delay on the side street, so it's minimal impact. Thank you. And awesome. And I'll hand back to Alison.
Thank you, Phil. So what's next for us? In the program, we'll continue to identify locations where we can provide this priority, both on and off the freight network, and also look for more opportunities for the appropriate data collection sites. We'll also continue to investigate the use of new technologies to support this freight program and provide different opportunities to mesh the data. We will also look at the ability to monitor the small and medium freight vehicles, which is proving quite a challenge for the whole industry. And at the moment, Austroads are reconsidering their standards of how they approach this challenge. And also, there's an opportunity to look at these technologies to manage curbside as well, because that's a key consideration for our freight industry. But if I can close with three key messages, the first one is that efficient freight network is critical to the Gold Coast economy and employment. The second message is that the freight industry is adapting to changes through the use of these high productivity vehicles. So these high productivity vehicles will carry a third more freight. What that means for our network is that it's a reduced number of heavy vehicles on our network, which reduces congestion, and we know that congestion will be around a cost of $40 billion to the Australian economy by 2041. So it's a really important factor when we're considering assisting the freight industry to be as productive as it possibly can and help our road network in the meantime. And the third message is a strong evidence base and reliable data. That's what's underpinning all of our investment decisions. So I think possibly the next meeting that you'll see another presentation about our freight network, and all of this information is helping to inform those decisions as we move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and don't go away too far because there might be a couple of questions there. All right, Councillor Vorster.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Can I just say what a highly competent, on-message presentation that is just so very, very, very encouraging. So thank you for that today. I just had some questions on freight-related issues, which will possibly be contemplated by a further body of work, but I just wanted to flag them as issues. Post boxes, letterboxes, I should say. Australia Post has shifted from letters to a parcel delivery service on the back of online deliveries. And from what I'm told, their business is struggling a little bit because they would dearly love to be able to drop off parcels into letterboxes, but because most existing mail slots are quite narrow, that becomes impractical. So we're actually ending up with a lot of avoidable trips into suburban areas where they've hoped to deliver something, but then have to turn around to card someone and then take the package out. I think there'd be some value, if we're not already doing it, to speak with Australia Post about some of their preferences around end-of-trip facilities, i.e. the design of letterboxes, and whether there's a role for council to assist them to increase their rate of successful delivery without having to force someone to a post shop or to have a car or a delivery vehicle come in unnecessarily. I think that'd be worth doing. Also interested in the city's view on click and collect lockers. So I'm seeing the likes of Coles, Kmart and Amazon locating these click and collect lockers in, let's call them novel locations that don't necessarily have good set down or queuing facilities. And my observation is that they end up causing a little bit of avoidable congestion. So I just wonder whether we are doing any work when we engage with the freight industry directly with the likes of Coles and Amazon around where they're placing those lockers and whether we can provide them with some advice about whether a location's appropriate or not. And I'm happy for these to be taken on notice, Madam Chair, or if the Acting Director's got a comment, I'm happy to hear it too. As I go, it's up to you, Matt.
For you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Councillor Vorster. We have, as part of the delivery of the Freight Network Plan 2018, we have established a freight partnership group, I think it's called. So it's probably an area where in the recent times, for obvious reasons, pandemic related, we haven't had as many of those meetings as what we would have liked to have done. But certainly your feedback's very welcome in regard to those quite unique emerging areas of, like we said, micro freight, which does cause, as we know, some local issues on the network, as we know.
Yeah, and I mean, for me as a non-transport engineer, I've only got my level 2 in theory. I can read a traffic guidance scheme. Delivery lockers offer us the ability to time deliveries outside of peak congestion, right? So after hours, they seem like a really good option, but we want them at the right locations. Amazon in particular, AusPost and Coles Group would be great. I'm also interested, and maybe this delves a little bit more into the town planning sphere, but clearly we've got this Yatala enterprise area that's generating a lot of heavy freight. But I wonder whether we've spoken with P&E to understand whether there are any contemplated fulfilment facilities that are planned elsewhere in the city, where they do the picking, the packing and the sending. Because my sense is, and I think Carton Cloud is a bit of a Gold Coast success story, there's an opportunity for businesses to get into the fulfilment space for micro and small businesses. And they won't necessarily be using the big warehouses that you get in Logan, Ipswich, or in Yatala. So I'd be keen to make sure that if we are receiving applications or pre-lodgement meetings and what have you, that may point to a demand for these sorts of facilities elsewhere in the city, we're contemplating that as part of our freight planning. Also, the role of the airport. Obviously, there's been a bit of tension around freight deliveries coming into the airport after hours. That could suggest that the airport is almost at capacity for freight handling. And I think it'd be worth us just having a look at whether that then places a constraint on certain types of goods coming into the city from the southern end. Because if it is the view of the government that that capacity is fixed and we're not going to see an increase, then we need to perhaps be looking at other ways of getting freight in. And it could be through Wellcamp in Toowoomba, and maybe we need to be paying attention to that western incoming traffic. Two other things, just on the stream system. So I'm assuming we're using a computer vision model to identify vehicles. Is that right? Or are we looking at the automatic number plate recognition, grabbing the license plate and then checking that against the state's registration database to determine whether we're using a heavy vehicle? In streams. Yeah, so in the vision that we saw, a vehicle was identified. Was that vehicle identified because of a computer vision model, or was it because we had an automatic number plate recognition device pull off the rego and cross-reference that on the state's records?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Councillor Vorster, for the question. In the video, the vehicle was detected via the weigh motion system, which is the in-pavement system, which could detect the weight of the vehicle. We have trialled ANPR systems on the broader road network just to see how effective they are in capturing number plates. But you're correct that the intention is that we can then compare them to databases of heavy vehicles, and then we can monitor their movement around the broader network, and that's when we could potentially move into that curbside management space as well.
So is the ideal outcome the number plate technology rather than the others? Well, I guess what I'm trying to understand is I've seen a database of regos and vehicle types and classifications. It's an open data set. For me, that provides the most rich information about a vehicle, you know, its weight, its length, so on and so forth. Is that the gold standard, or do we need these other complementary technologies in order to make the correct judgments if they're to be automated?
For sure. So through Madam Chair, and Alison might complement what I say here, but it's essentially a blend of those data sources. We admitted, I think, a couple of years ago when we had the freight plan developed that we were less data rich in the freight space than what we were in other areas. So we're trialling, I guess, the data collection techniques that would provide some of these are they're new technology, brackets, it's expensive technology. So we want to make sure that if we put a proposition to the committee or to council that we're, I guess, suggesting a value for money data collection mechanism. So you're right, ANPR is it's great for origin destination modelling and tracking of vehicles, not just freight vehicles, but all sorts of vehicles. We do collect a fair bit of that through our road network management program. But certainly there'll be a combination of the technologies that Alison, I think, had one of the previous slides, is about half a dozen or so techniques, and we're just making sure that for the part of the area of the city that we need to collect that certain type of data, that we are doing so in a way that that we're not, I guess, we're not over-investing, can I say, but we're getting that right sweet spot of investment in the data collection methods that will help that asset management, the policy and planning, and the infrastructure investment as well. And
Madam Chair, just lastly, I think all of us can have a tendency to be a bit parochial and think that the Gold Coast is possibly the only city out there. But my sense of it is that there are quite a lot of distribution centres in Ipswich, which may serve the Gold Coast in terms of, you know, fulfilment. Think of the supermarkets, for example. Are we doing any work in concert with the adjacent local government areas to understand a little bit about the traffic and demand that's being generated in those areas that might spill over into our catchment?
So through Madam Chair, mainly through the department, Councillor Vorster. So certainly the Transport Main Road Department has a responsibility for regional freight movement, and certainly that's an area where they are, if you like, a partner with us on the freight management planning for the city, to a point where again we are overdue to have another conversation with the state government about this. I think, like I said, it's been time that we've been focused on collecting our data, getting our planning policies right. The investment schedule that's on our forward schedule for, I think it's the next committee meeting, will show you some of those, the outcomes of those planning conversations with the department as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Caldwell.
Thanks. Through you, Madam Chair. Effectively, what you're doing here is you're being responsive to something that happens on the road and then holding the green time longer, right? So is there a broader application for this? Because to me, you could use a similar type of technology to detect vehicle queuing through an intersection so that when the tail gets too long, you know that you need more green time on the lights. So like I come down to Stephen Street almost every day when I'm driving to work and I go, well, why is it that we're giving too much green time to the cars coming from Stephen Street turning south when there's only 3 of them and it's holding up all of this traffic for all of these cycles? So is there a version of an application of this that could be used to detect queuing or a speed reduction that would indicate more traffic building or something like that?
Madam Chair, in short, yes, Councillor Caldwell, there is, and it's certainly the new technologies that are available through our traffic control systems that the department's trialling at the moment are a lot more sensitive to that dynamic management, can I say. Some of the intersections in the city, we've got 270 something intersections we look after. Some of them do run on in an isolated way, so they're less. It's less smart technology, can I say, than some of the newer style of intersections, which are coordinated, part of a coordinated system. So we're working with the department, trialling some European-based technology that will help with exactly what you just mentioned then.
Lane flow, once they're triggered, they then cause something to happen. But we don't proactively sense what's happening on the main arterial necessarily and then respond to that. That's how most of them are set up?
Some of them, that's correct, for you, Madam Chair. So the ingestion, if you like, of the big data that Phil and Alison are collecting now is leading to much more proactively planned and mapped out coordinated systems across those intersections. So there's a lot more smarts into the system now than what there was, say, 5-10 years ago. There's a lot more coordination and communication between the sets of signals in the network. Always room for improvement, and that's why we continue to collect data and to fine-tune the plans, the time-of-day plans. There's usually about 6 or 8 time-of-day plans, I think, in the network, where our guys up at the TMC will, using the information that Phil and Alison can provide them, can actually just keep fine-tuning those time-of-day plans to make sure they are as accurately as mapped to the demands, the trend demands, if I can say that, the usual demands, so that they can provide as much reliability on the network as possible.
So we've been doing this for like 3 years kind of thing. Is this data getting reported to council or is it just being used in the back end?
So, Madam Chair, so a lot of the data that comes from our network intelligence program was formed as part of our State of the Network report at the end of each calendar year. So we
didn't see the actual raw data from that, only the outcome.
Yeah, we usually, we're trying to aggregate it to a point where it's meaningful at a can I say, macro level. There's a lot of granularity to the data that is in our NETS program. A lot of granularity, almost, some might argue almost too much. So part of the work that Phil and Alison do is to try to aggregate the data and to identify trends that are meaningful for us to communicate with our road network managers, with yourselves. If you've got inquiries about, it might be a customer might write in and ask a question about a certain time of day, we can drill down into the granularity of the data and actually have I guess, quantitative facts about what was happening on the network that day. Some of the days in the last couple of years, for example, when there's been a change of circumstance, be it COVID related or other, where we've had immediate identification of the reduction in volume. It might have to do with incident management as well. The major incident happened a few weeks ago on the M1. We've got real-time data there and then, so I can, much to Phil's annoyance, I can pick up the phone and call Phil and find out exactly what's happening in the road network on that day. And
so then roughly the way in motion thing that we saw on that Stanmore Turner intersection. What's the approximate cost of getting that sort of set up and running?
Through you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Councillor Caldwell. That particular intersection or that particular setup cost about $120,000 in total. Now, that included the 4 lanes of the way in motion system. There was guardrail required. We've also set the site up for, we future-proofed it so we can use it as a future trial site for other technologies. So all the infrastructure is embedded in there, and that did contribute to the cost, as well as there was some design and investigations into implementing the priority system. So 120,000 is probably very much the high end of that system. We've recently just installed the one at Pimpama Jacobswell Road. That was approximately $60,000 using I guess, communications, not in ground communications, as well as solar power. So it significantly reduced the capital and ongoing operational costs.
Councillor Peter Young and then Councillor Owen Jones.
Thank you, Chair. So I think it's theoretical that I might give you my registration number and get green lights all the way to work. But just in the light of questions that have been raised, I just wanted to draw your attention, the committee's attention, to an outcome on Binstead Way in Pacific Pines at the very significant roundabout intersection with Pacific Pines Boulevard, which in the morning peak was very congested, and there's a huge stream of traffic going more than a kilometre to the west as people are approaching the motorway to the east. And so I think last year it was a new system was put in where we've got monitoring of the vehicles through CCTV and in-ground monitoring devices. You're probably better to explain this than me, Matt. And then there's a signalised control of traffic entering the roundabout from Pacific Pines Boulevard, and it's allowed the traffic to move so smoothly. There's almost no backlog of traffic whatsoever. So, like, in terms of a relatively sophisticated treatment that's in place now, I really commend the officers for having achieved that, and I think it's just notable that it's such a great success.
Yeah. Councillor Owen Jones.
So how many, do you have any targeted intersections where you would like to add this? Have you identified a list?
Through you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Councillor Owen Jones. Yes, we have. There are only about 5 signalised intersections on our freight network, so they're very restricted. So we're just investigating those 5. There are a couple of key requirements for the implementation of this design, including the pavement, the quality of the pavement, as well as the actual location of the intersection, what the surrounding land use is, and so on and so forth. So we are considering and investigating those for this particular priority design.
And I'm assuming that may lead to a different engineering solution for each of the intersections depending on what their layout is. But I think it would be interesting to see what if it was 120,000 for the pilot, what the next 5 might look like in regards to dollar amounts, because I think that's when we'll commit, So if it's like
described as low-hanging fruit.
Yeah. So maybe where the rubber hits the road. So, Herman, have you got any?
Where the rubber meets the road intersections.
Yeah. I was actually after puns, to tell you the truth.
Oh, right.
But to me, if there's 5 with a capital cost of 300,000 or something like that, that's actually where we should be.
The lights are on, but no one's home. Sorry. Yeah.
And 3, Madam Chair, and that's the intention. The intention is the investment that we do have. I mean, like I said, some of this technology it isn't cheap, but what we wanted to make sure is that we do install and trial technology and big data collective methodologies that are represent value for money, and we can get the benefit on the network. And as Phil said before, it's not just about the pavement management; it's about safety as much as the end of the day. The fully laden vehicles aren't stopping at red lights.
or half the price of Darren's bus.
Yeah. And I'm going to go to Councillor Hamill now. Thank you.
Madam Chair, thank you. And thank you, Alison and Phil. I've had a few briefings on this now and taken a keen interest in it, mainly because of the item that's coming to next committee, which this is well placed to happen beforehand, but also too, so the focus has been on the existing intersection, but maybe what wasn't picked up on as strongly in the presentation is the use of the information to inform future design work. So the one on Pimpama-Jaguarsville Road, there isn't an intersection there at the moment, but there is a program of CapEx projects coming up through there for a set of traffic lights to be installed on Pimpama-Jaguarsville Road and Wharf Road, the upgrade of the culvert bridges over the Pimpama River and over Hotham Creek. And while there would have been information available from the tube counters previously to help inform those design decisions, what the team has very quickly found is that having the weight information has changed already what those designs will look like. So what strength of concrete in the pipes and the culverts in the road, or what design is used. So not only helping to change congestion and change existing existing intersection patterns, but the value of this data in really smart cost-benefit engineering of pavement design and bridges and culverts and intersections in the future up here, because they're the most expensive roads we have to build, are ones where heavy vehicles have to go on them. And when we can be really, really smart about that. And another thing that we discussed in our briefing, and I'd probably flag, is that this information can be used by EP&E in their future work too, that in the same way at the moment we have certain roads in our network that are B-double roads, etc., that only look at the length of the vehicles, that this information could help inform that why could we not have a future in the industrial area where if you're a business, say one of the distribution centres, or a business that relies upon a lot of heavy truck movements, that we would actually say, well, we don't want you over there because that road leading into there isn't designed for your weights. We'd prefer you over here where we have built this road, built the bridges and culverts to accommodate the kind of weights that you handle. That it's another step forward to much smarter planning and to reduce the amount of money we have to spend, because if every road in Yatala has to be upgraded with pavement design to handle the heaviest vehicles, it's going to cost more money than we can afford. Yeah, more than a truckload. So just there, and I appreciate it was picked up on the fight, because I hear all the time about the use of data for smarter decisions, and this is a really, really exciting one. And can I point out, we're the first council that we're aware of in the country to do this. So this is out. This has been developed internally and activate that there, and it's. Yeah, so well, we're pretty confident. We're very confident we are, and it's the kind of thing that actually will set Yatala Enterprise area apart from other areas. It will be part of the decision of businesses to look at our industrial area and say, not only are the roads of a better quality, but we could actually show them in data that if they build in that area, that we'll get their trucks to the highway quicker, and that will save them money. It will lead to investment and jobs in our city. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks for that, Councillor Hamill. So, councillors, was there any other, and thank you both very much for that presentation. Was there any other questions, councillors? Councillor Vorster.
Madam Chair, just one, whether the presentation will be included in the minutes.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And two, I think what we're not talking about is the benefits to reducing road noise. Just want to flag that, because we talked about emissions, but if you've got a heavy vehicle that needs to pull up at a set of lights, causes a major racket. And if you've got sensitive noise receptors, that causes a lot of amenity issues in that catchment. So if we can keep that vehicle running through the lights safely and reduce road noise, you actually get lifestyle benefits out of it as well, worth talking about.
Thanks, Councillor Vorster. So a recommendation is to note the freight data program presentation. So moved by Councillor Peter Young, seconded by Councillor Vorster. All those in favour? That is carried. Thank you both for that. Councillors, our final agenda item for the day is on grey paper, and there's a presentation for that too. I move that we go into close as it's to do with the local government budget. So moved by myself, seconded by the acting mayor. All those in favour? That's carried. Live streaming's back on. Councillors, we've had a very robust discussion in our closed session around the asset condition and infrastructure, and your requirements will be coming forward for us to discuss during budget and that. So, and I'm sure the officers are very pleased with all the feedback that we're able to give there. I thank Chris and Jeremy for a great report there. And if I can have someone move that. Moved by Councillor Vorster, seconded to Councillor Peter Young. All those in favour? That's carried. Councillors, was there any GB items today? Councillor Vorster?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question through you to the Acting Director. A few weeks ago, there were some inquiries put through to the Office of the Mayor that the Mayor asked me to respond to, and I know I've anecdotally experienced the issue myself. It appears as though there's been a boom in the number of caravans and boat trailers that have been purchased over the last 2 years, and we're finding that at least I'm finding that they're ending up in greater numbers in our residential streets. Now, a couple of years ago, this committee considered a report that looked at whether it was within our powers to I suppose, introduce new rules to help push these untethered trailers and caravans out of suburban streets where they might be causing hazard. That report ultimately found that we couldn't because our hands were tied by Queensland's road rules. I've certainly noticed that a number of these caravans and boat trailers are being parked very close to intersections and opposite parks and playgrounds, where children tend to cross the road, and they're causing huge safety issues, absolutely huge safety issues. And the situation's getting so absurd that I'm now having to raise CRs regularly to get yellow lines painted on either side of people's driveways just so they can exit their driveways. It's just causing so much consternation out there. I just wonder, through you, Madam Chair, to the Acting Director, and I'm not proposing we get another report, but whether you may reach out to your counterparts in TMR, who I understand are aware of the increase in the number of registrations of these vehicles, to see whether the state government has any strategy or plan to respond to the safety and amenity issues that have been created in our suburban streets. Thanks.
Issues there. I'll go to Councillor Gay. Acting Mayor.
Sorry, I was just going to ask, and it might be the wrong committee to ask it, but when I was first involved with council, there was signage at the entries to the city indicating a 2-hour parking limit right across the city. Was it part of state regulation that was removed? Because I do recall it being removed, but that would resolve the problem without identifying specific vehicles if we were able to reintroduce a timed parking limit across the city.
Can I just ask, because that is time parking limit, I wasn't aware of this, time parking limit just for like
anywhere in the city there was,
boats and that.
For unsigned areas within the city there was, I think it was a 2-hour limit. Wasn't it, Peter? It was, and we did have signage at all of the entries to the city so that our officers could act if someone left something parked unacceptably, in a location.
I think that was superseded when we introduced our own traffic areas.
Yep.
Yeah.
But why could we not reintroduce it? It doesn't need to be 2 hours, but if you introduced 12 hours, for example, as our limit, then we could move on any vehicle that was parking for longer periods on the street.
Through Madam Chair, it's certainly something we can look into. I know that along with the Lifestyle and Community Directorate, we have looked at a few options about how we can apply the local legislation that is available to us, which doesn't contradict with the Queensland Road rules, whether it's a city-wide application or whether it's in certain locations where we know there are sensitive land uses and areas where safety issues are embellished. So it's a piece of work we are partnering with L&C on. If I can reach out to TMR, Councillor Vorster, as you said, I think if there is movement in that Queensland road rule space, we've seen it recently with the personalised mobility devices, where we weren't aware of advancements being made in the road rules there. So we can certainly reach out and look at some options available to us, be them citywide or be them in location specifics. As always, councillors, can I say though, if you have any specific areas of particular concern, please reach out to us and we can investigate those on a case-by-case basis though as well.
And if I could just continue in support of what Councillor Vorster has said, sorry, Herman, I had a specific incident in the Highland Reserve Estate where there was a very dark coloured trailer parked on the street, and a child was seriously injured from running out from behind the trailer and not being visible. But there was no action that the council was able to take because under the regulations that exist, the trailer was legally parked. But the vision for other drivers is really poor in many instances, especially in areas adjacent to parkland, as Councillor Vorster has suggested.
So, Madam Chair, I think what I'd like to see is officers somehow have the ability to be authorised to have move-on powers. So, like I'm not suggesting we ban caravans or boat trailers from our streets, although I know Councillor Taylor's predecessor sought to do that. But I think sometimes there are judgment calls that need to be made by city officers to address a safety risk, especially one that's informed by community experience or on the back of an incident. So I'd be hoping that in the discussions with TMR, it could be around a broad definition of a broad definition of a safety risk or a nuisance, where council might be authorised to either fine or move on a vehicle. As I said, in front of a playground, having a whopping big caravan that's 7.4 metres and being unable to move it on because it's not 7.5, very frustrating and hard to explain to our communities.
And I also think as a council it's incumbent upon us too, because for the last 2 years through the pandemic, we've seen the proliferation of people purchasing their own caravans or boats or jet skis or whatever because they're holidaying at home, but the government actually hasn't given us any more power, I guess, to actually address those issues in our suburbs. And when we're talking about caravans, people are waiting they've ordered 18 months out, so we know that this isn't stopping now. This is something that they're going to continue to increase their presence in our streets, and we already know how our residents feel about that. And look, I've got a 7.4 metre van in my street, in a one-way street that takes up 2 car parks, and it's been there 12 months now and hasn't been moved. 7.4, yes, because we've had officers out to measure it. So, and in a street that's only got 7 car parks, it takes up 2 or 1.5. And you can understand justifiably why our residents are becoming, I guess, angrier about it and, weary with it. And this isn't going to stop now because those orders are 18 months out, and it's the same as you talk to any of the marine industry too. They've got orders that are going to deliver boats that are going to sit in front of people's places in 12 months' time because they're not accommodating them on their own property. So I think it's something we really need to be looking at going further forward.
We missed Councillor Porter. No, I'm fine. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry.
Declare the meeting closed at 15:04. Great meeting, thank you. Yes.